Anybody out there just tired? This is for you. If you are like most of America, burning the candle at both ends with no real sign of any change in sight, we want to talk about rest in a 2-part series. First, covering external rest, rhythms of external rest. And then the second one will cover rhythms of internal, mental, emotional, heart rest. We think you're going to love this one.
Welcome to the Family Goals Podcast. We're Graham and Shay Cochran, and we believe that your family can do things differently. The payoffs are worth it, and the little things can have a huge impact.
Man, I'm really excited about this one. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and she was talking about how, and she's a fellow entrepreneur, so overachiever,
Yay for
like
us.
just like us. We're talking about how she knows she needs rest, but rest can be so hard. It can be so hard to create rhythms of rest, especially depending on the season of life. If you have young kids, where you're at with that. But then also just in light of all of our internal drives and the things that we want to get done, feel like we should get done, feel like need to be done, rest is just so hard, right? Rest is so hard to come by as a discipline. And then even when we have opportunities for rest, it's just hard to settle in and actually enjoy it. But we need rest, right? It's not only a biblical mandate, but just biologically, physically,
Yep.
we need rest. And I don't think the world is going to hand us rest. Our schedule's not going to clear itself unless, COVID was an interesting,
exception.
invitation to rest. But in general, for the most part, life isn't just going to clear your schedule for you unless you're really sick or something happens like that forces you to rest. So our heart for you today in this 2-part series is just getting curious about what better rhythms of physical rest can look like for you and for your family in your season. And then part 2, we're going to talk about some of the things that might help invite us all into more internal rest, right? There's so much worry and anxiety, and our brain, my brain is pulled in 100 different directions at all times. So what does it look like to cultivate rhythms of internal rest? What are the things that we do? And again, with everything that we talk about here on this show, this really isn't about the way that we do it. Yeah. We're not, parenting experts, family experts, marriage. I don't actually think we're experts at anything, really.
Nope.
But
Just hanging in there.
Just hanging on. But the invitation, though, is for you to just consider, man, all right, I want to think intentionally about this. What could this look like for me? And maybe I can do things different than the way culture is doing them, or the families around me are doing them, or even my friends are doing them. So that's always the invitation here on the Family Goals Podcast. It's not to do it like us. It's just to consider doing it differently. So let's jump in. We'll talk about external rest first.
Yeah.
I thought it might be helpful, interesting to just talk about some of the ways that we incorporate rhythms of physical rest in our home as a family, and then kind of each of us individually, and then what we do to kind of help the kids create rhythms of rest. So jump in wherever you think you want to start.
I love it. I'm excited. Before we get into some of the specifics, I just think it's important to talk about how it's such a interesting topic, in that I think we all know we need rest, because I think we all would probably say our lives are busy. I haven't met someone who isn't busy. So we probably feel like, I would love to rest, need rest, vacation, or you're longing for that rest. So it's like a known need. I don't have to really convince you that you probably want to rest or slow down at some point. But after that point, I feel like people get really like off in different sections of the brain of like, well, how valuable is rest? Is
do I even want to rest?
Do I even really want to rest?
Anyway?
And that's kind of weird, but I don't know if you're just convincing yourself that you don't want it because it's hard to get. And then there's like the people that know they need rest, but they don't choose rest because it is a choice. No one's going to come. There's no rest police that are going to come say, hey, you need rest. We're going to stop you. Yeah. Except for when COVID happened and we kind of were forced to rest. So it's like, why do we not choose rest? And I just think, without getting into a lot of details, because I want to give us some examples, I do think it's worth pointing out that there are some things holding us back. I think one of my guesses is a lot of us don't rest because we don't think, let me put it this way, we're afraid to rest.
Oh, for sure.
We're afraid. If I rest, whatever rest looks like for you, if I take a day off, if I enjoy my weekend.
If I turn off the TV or if I unplug.
Well, I will things will fall behind. Like
Mm-hmm.
I will literally get behind, which will make me even more exhausted. So it's like I'm drowning. I want to take a break, but if I take a break, I feel like I'll sink even further and be drowning even more.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of fear that prohibits us from rest. A lot of stories we're telling ourselves, like, if I rest, this will happen, which may or may not be true. Rest isn't modeled very well in America, in Western culture. It is in other cultures. You go spend time in the south of France, like those people will unplug for a couple of months and they can rest really well, but they see other people doing it. So it's a little bit easier for them. Us, we see other people just hustling harder and harder. And then you just might have a specific narrative about your season. Well, I would rest if I weren't in this season with young kids or with
Business.
the business in this season. I got to push through like another 5 years and then I can rest. Like, it's kind of amazing how every season you're in, you can find a thing to point to why now is not a good time to rest, when that probably is the best time or most needed time to rest. So I don't want to solve all those things necessarily in one episode, but there's probably a reason why we're having to even talk about rest, because it's not natural for us.
Yeah. And I think there's also just perpetually competing desires. I want to rest, but I want my kids to play sports and be able to,
That's good.
be really good within it. And maybe they'd play in college, that kind of thing. Or I want to rest, but I really want to be included in all of these social events going on. I want to rest, but. So I think there's like kind of a constant warring of desires. And I don't know if people stop and really make the decision, or if they're just kind of going with, well, the invitation's there, let's do it. My kid qualifies, so we'll do it. We're technically free, so we'll do it. I don't know if they're thinking, maybe they are, but maybe they're just going with what feels like it's what they have to do, or is the thing that everybody else is doing, or is logical. I mean, there's just a lot there, obviously, to like why we don't rest. But
yeah, so maybe just for today, for the purpose of this episode, just pause for a second and ask yourself, do you feel like you struggle with rest? And if you had to guess, what comes to mind is it fear? Is it lack of intentionality? Is it you don't want to miss out?
I mean, you may have structured your life so that rest is not possible. That also, you're just living out what you've already committed to, and what you've committed to doesn't make any room for rest.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just one last thought here. It is interesting as a business coach who I have a bent towards rest and a bent towards wanting to make my business serve my life and not the other way around, where I'm having to serve my business. And so I'm having conversations about working less or optimizing your business for more flexibility. It's been amazing to me how over the last 8+ years of talking about this, how many people want to fight me on the idea of having more margin in their life, like as if they don't want it. And I realized that maybe not everybody wants rest. Like they just are either addicted to the activity, or it feels good, or it makes them feel important. I don't know. I can't put the label on it, but maybe there's something going on in your heart too about like, if you don't want rest, like why is that? Is there something that maybe you haven't experienced good rest? Like a lot of people,
I think that's part of it.
Just don't know the difference.
We could talk about talking about rest probably for
I just wanted to start with some food for thought.
Well, and I was I'll cut myself off so that we can jump into some practicals.
Yeah. So just think about those things because otherwise these might be a random list of things that Graham and Shay do, and you're like, well, why would I want to do those things? If you've ever felt, I would love to rest, but we're going to give you some examples of what that rest can look like externally, physically for us in this episode. And then it'll give you some food for thought, and then carry that over into next week when we do part 2 and talk about the internal rest, the soul rest. I think you'll see how connected they are.
Yeah. So jumping in, nowhere in particular. Let's give one more preface. We don't rest perfectly. Like we are always talking about, is this the way that life is supposed to feel? Like, when does it stop? There's just, if it's not this, then it's something else. And we're constantly kind of tweaking and having these conversations. So it's not something that we have always done well. I don't even know that we would get an A++ now. But there are things that we have done intentionally over the years to build in strategic, intentional like rhythms of rest. So without further ado. One of those things would be morning quiet times. So both of us wake up at different times, but relatively early when the house is quiet, so that we can both get our own individual time of stillness and quiet in the morning. And probably looks a little bit different for both of us, but the commonalities would be some scripture reading, prayer, just thinking, sitting, listening, journaling, maybe a little bit of reading if we're working through a book, generally on like spiritual growth or something like that. But we're both fighting for around about an hour of stillness or rest in the morning. And what's so cool about that is that it enables us to start the day from a position of rest, right? Instead of starting the day reacting, we're able to start from a position of rest. Now, I will say, we are not in the season of life where we have little kids waking us up at 4:00 in the morning crying, or little toddlers running into our room at 6:30 a.m. And then, they need food and they want to be played with and they need time and attention. So it hasn't been like this in every season. So don't hear that this is the only way, but maybe hear that as your kids get older, this is an opportunity that is available to you, that we're able to get to bed at a good time. So we're able to wake up early and start the day with a rhythm of stillness. And now it's something that we're seeing Chloe do as well. And it's a joy to get to do it. It sets the day just in such a great way. So starting the day from a position of rest.
Yeah, and I just love it because it's the principle of putting first things first. Like it's the same in finances. Like, oh yeah, I'll look at the end of the month after I pay my bills and see if I have any money left over to put in the savings account or my 401k. And it's like, that's how most people live. And so that's why most people don't have any savings. It's like, okay, no, I'm going to choose to set aside a percentage every month at the beginning of the month into my savings, or even if it's true for giving or generosity, I'm going to do that first and then figure out the rest afterwards. The beautiful thing about trying to rest first is you guaranteed an hour of rest before
sitting
the day.
Still.
Yeah, like it's guaranteed. It's locked in. The whole rest of the day could go to hell in a handbasket, but you already got rest, which in a way is what fuels you for the rest of the day, as opposed to, I hope, later in the day. This is why for me, when I say like, okay, it's a busy morning, I'll try to like get some stillness time later in the day. It's really hard for me to actually make that time. So to Shay's point,
it's impossible for me to make that time.
To Shay's point, like if your mornings are just chaotic, like it is a fight, and all of these things might change seasonal wise, but it's worth pointing out, like, if you want rest, why not just take it now take it first and then see what the rest of the day holds.
You'll probably hear that again in session 2 on soul rest, because there's a lot there too. Okay, second thing, and you guys have heard us talk about this before if you listen to the show, we generally stop work at 5. All work is cut off at 5. Neither of us are really doing any kind of work in the afternoons, in the evenings post 5. So that's just going to create a barrier between us and work so that we can rest. And some of the ways that we make sure that stays in place beyond accountability, which I think is pretty fair. Like we have kind of a spoken, unspoken agreement, I guess. Maybe just we both teach on this so much that it creates its own built-in accountability. But we both know it would be weird if you come home and open up the laptop, and it's weird if I open up the laptop. But if we do that, we're like, okay, what's going on? What you doing over there? So there's a little bit of built-in commitment and accountability to each other to do that. But we also don't get any kind of email notifications to our phones. We don't get Slack notifications to our phones, Voxer, things like that. So there's nothing in the evening short of like you get home and you realize, oh my gosh, I was supposed to send that person that thing. There's nothing else that's going to kind of trigger us or say like, hey, pull us back into work. We just have those things in place. So that means that the evening for us can be focused on family and rest and unwinding and enjoying the home, enjoying the sunset, sitting outside, reading a book. Evenings are geared towards family, not work. So just pretty simple, practical principle there.
Yeah, and it's funny. We've counseled and coached a lot of singles who are like, "Well, I'm not married. I don't have kids. So what's the problem with me working? I love working. And so they'll work, all day long or all hours of the day or whatever. And it's like, hey, the beauty about if you have your own business, let's say specifically, is you can work whenever. I kind of love that flexibility because maybe you're a night owl. That's fine, I suppose. But the problem and the silliness comes when it's like, why would you want to drive on the interstate at 80 miles an hour, all the way to the red light and then stop all of a sudden at the red light, like which is when you go to bed? Like you'd want to start to peel off the interstate and slowly roll down to a stop so that you're not having an abrupt stop at the red light. You're peeling and slowing down. And so for us, like the 5 o'clock cutoff is a forced get out of the fast lane. We're not shutting down for the night. Like we still have chores and diving with each other and the girls and cooking dinner and cleaning up. But it's like it's like a mental start the slowing process because
Yeah.
there's a lot in our brains. Like we run multiple companies and we do ministry and we have kids and our brains don't just shut off at 5 o'clock.
The like schmear of like work brain all the way
Schmear,
down.
yeah. So you'll see how this ties in. I like schmear. This is how it ties into next week's episode about internal rest. But just knowing that the physical rest can start to train the internal rest. So like at 5 o'clock, if we're done working, at least I've got 4 or 5 hours for the brain to catch up to like, okay, yeah, we're done working. So by the time I go to bed, I'm not like just fresh off of a tough email or a great idea, even a positive idea that now my brain's spinning. So it's just like a get out of the fast lane, start to slow down.
And I love that if you're single listening to this and you're like, well, I just love my work and what else would I be doing with my time? I get that, but why not just start creating rhythms of rest now? Like, why not train your body and your mind and your soul now to keep work contained? Because there's always we don't stop at 5 because we're done for the day. No, we stop at 5 by choice because we want to prioritize other things. And I know, even if you love your work, that there are other things in your life, hopefully, that you love even more than work, like your friendships, like taking care of your own physical body. Like there are other things I'm sure that you would say, yeah, I really care about that. So why not just go ahead and start to prioritize life so that work has boundaries? And after that, you're able to take care of yourself, take care of your home, take care of your friends, take care of, go out, be social, be in your community, take care of your soul, that kind of stuff.
You actually do better work when you get back to work. So if you're, I love Cal Newport's Deep Work book is a great sort of dive into that, like what it takes, like resting really helps you do deep work when you do work. So anyway, there's a lot there.
Okay, so next we have 2 ways that you and I individually build rest into our lives. And this for me, actually for both of us, these are newer practices. Like I would say in the last year. Yeah. So why don't you talk about yours first, one way that you build some physical rest into your
for
week.
me, I will go for long walks. Like we live right near downtown Tampa and my office is in downtown. So it's right on the Riverwalk, which is a really cool path that goes along the Hillsborough River. And then it goes to Bayshore Boulevard, which is just this awesome 4.5 mile continuous sidewalk on the bay, and there's these beautiful mansions. It's a great place to be out and walking. And so what I'll do is like force myself to not go into work, quote unquote, until 10 or 10:30, because after dropping off the kids at school and it's like in the 8 o'clock, I'll go to the office, but then I'll change and go out for a 2-hour, 6-mile walk.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of funny because it has trained me to delay getting into work, which is I'm a little antsy.
Like forces you to calm your anxiety about like all that needs to be done.
I either want to solve a problem or take over the world, and I'm having to delay both of those. Yeah. But it's great. I don't listen to any podcasts when I walk. I don't listen to any music.
I would lose my mind.
Yeah, people think I'm crazy. But I do put in headphones so you won't talk to me because I'm an introvert.
Fun fact.
Yeah, so if you see me with headphones.
On the airplane too.
Yeah, I'm not listening to anything. It is just so you're like, oh, he must be listening.
It's an introvert signal.
Yeah, please don't talk to me. Please just don't want you to talk to me. But I do put them in.
Yeah.
And I just walk. And 2 things happen. One, like there's nothing to do. So it just starts to quiet me down again before the day. So I'm really like slow in my mind. 2, I find, and other people have heard talk about this. Ryan Holiday's talked about this. Ryan Holiday. And he was talking to Cal Newport about this, mentioning Cal about he gets his best ideas when he walks. And they were talking about what's happening. The brain like goes into almost shutdown mode when you walk, and when you're not listening to anything. And so all of a sudden you start to like notice other things because it's not spinning. It starts to just like numb down. And so you actually can like activate different parts of your brain that are really, really creative. And so for me, I get really good ideas. So I will bring my phone. It's in like airplane mode, but just for the notes app. So I'll walk and it might be like 45 minutes in and I'll get an idea for a podcast or I'll get an idea for someone I want to reach out to or just something. And they may not be good ideas, but I get a ton of ideas and I'll just write them down. So for me, it's a space. I'm creating space. Even though I'm physically walking, it's not stressful. It's chill, but it's good for my soul.
Yeah. And I love with both of these rhythms that these are mid-work week rhythms that we've both chosen to create rest. And the only piece that I'll just add in there for you, because someone might say, well, walking for 6 miles, that doesn't sound like rest to me. For you, walking is very restful. Yeah, so
it's my happy
might
place.
be something else for you, might be cycling, might be swimming, might be something else. But for you, that is you taking opportunity to build rest into your actual work hours. So anyway, I think that's pretty cool. For me, I take Wednesdays off. So midweek, I'm working Monday, Tuesday, I'm working Thursday, and then Friday we're doing date day and podcast day. Wednesday, I try to take entirely off just for myself. So I don't book any calls. I don't really book I try not to book anything. Like I just want one day. Granted, my kids are in school, so I understand this is seasonal. One day, I don't have to be anywhere. I don't have to get ready by a certain time. I can go as slow as I want in the mornings. I can go out back and garden. This is kind of when I'll try to do the things that are really fueling and life-giving for me. Garden or just, honestly, I like cleaning up my house. I like just kind of restoring the order, and that's just very cathartic to me. So I want to be able to take care of that stuff. So Wednesday, midweek, just like a full stop break. I really do not touch work at all on Wednesdays. At least that is a goal. I don't do it perfectly, but that is the goal that I've been kind of consistently trying to maintain for since sabbatical, since I came back from sabbatical. So since January for sure, it's just no work on Wednesday. So I can do life-giving activities midweek.
Hey, I hope that you're loving this episode. But listen, what we really want to do is save you from one more boring night of tech gather time spent scrolling your phone side by side. We have a better idea. Okay, we've created 5 absolutely foolproof conversation prompts to help you connect with your spouse today.
Yeah, these are literally fill in the blank easy. Simple questions, nothing heavy, nothing too serious. These are light and fun to do exactly what they say to help you connect. So to get these free conversation prompts, just go to familygoalspodcast.com/connect. They're free, they're fun, use them today. Now, back to the episode.
Yep. Helps be an entrepreneur or have your own
For
schedule.
sure. Yeah, obviously.
Note for entrepreneurs there, Ramit Sethi, he's a pretty brilliant entrepreneur. One of the things that he's done that I always thought was cool is Wednesdays. You mentioned Wednesdays. Is he doesn't take the day off, but he'll take 2 hours off in the middle of the day to just read.
That's really cool.
Books. And so he runs a major company. He's no meetings, don't bother me.
Yeah.
And it's for him, it's been a couple of days of producing and meetings and stuff. He's I need some time to not only shut off the noise, but also pour back in new ideas since he's a content creator. And so I always thought that was interesting of just a 2-hour reading block. And again, no one's going to come do this for you. And it's going to look different for everybody. These are just different ideas of what
that's the point.
Creating some space for physical rest can look like.
And what I like about these 2 examples is just it's forced rest midweek. When you're at your height of I need to get things done, right? First of the morning for you, midweek for me, you're oh, there's so much still to do on Wednesday that it's just a forced rhythm of rest.
It's an act of rebellion to put a stake in the ground and say no to the forward movement of progress and productivity, this onward march, especially in America and Western culture, that's the more you can produce, the faster you can produce it, the better. And there's the promise is the more you produce, the better you'll feel, and the more money, time, whatever, you'll have something. But it's a giant lie because the next day, we'll produce more.
There's just more.
And if we create an automation or an AI or a tool that can speed up your workflow, well, now you have more hours to fill with more stuff so you can get further. It never ends. And so what I love about your Wednesday or my walk, which I'm always a little itchy, I'm I should probably be doing something.
Or you get back I couldn't start my day until 11 o'clock.
It feels like you're perpetually behind, and I kind of choose to live that way. I kind of because it's a giant middle finger to the culture of just keep producing, because that never ends. It is a carrot that never leads you to rest. It's just you keep thinking maybe when I produce more. No one's going to give you rest. So you're saying forget it. I'm taking it now.
Yep. Okay, next one has to do with family evenings, rhythms of rest. We generally keep about 4 nights a week totally open with nothing on them, meaning you come home from work, I come home from work, the kids come home from school, and there's nothing on the schedule. So we have about 2 to 3 nights a week where we have recurring commitments, right? Sports. Now, our kids play sports at the school. Best decision that we ever made was taking them out of freaking rec leagues where you're driving all over the place every night. And we said, you can pick from the sports that your school offers. and do that right after school. So that's what's beautiful about that. Our kids are
Because
still
they're
doing
done
sports,
around 5-ish.
but they're done. Like
great.
they stay at school a little bit longer. They get, they play sports and then they're done for the evening. So between church, youth group, like
Friday night football games.
Friday night football games, because Chloe cheers. Like there's about 2 to 3 nights of the week that we are fully committed to things, and the other nights we're just totally free. And I love that, and I feel like I need that.
Yeah.
But also, and I also realize that that's kind of a personality thing too. We're both introverts. We both have our need our home time. And I know some people, it is incredibly life-giving to have a full home. And I would just say, make sure that you're on the same page with your spouse. Is it equally life-giving to both people in the marriage? And what about your kids? Like, how do your kids do? We can't just assume that. I mean, we know not all of our kids are the same. You have some introverts, you have some extroverts. So we're really trying to be aware of what everybody needs within the family. But the seasons that have been the stupid busiest for us are the ones when we were doing sports that was all over the place and we were driving and we had one or two nights of the week that were free at home.
Yeah.
And that was not a great season for our family.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can go for a while, maybe your personality. I'm glad you brought up personality type, because you might be loving the active evenings.
Mm-hmm.
And even I and you could go for a while, but then eventually you realize, well, there's no space where we're able to really talk about meaningful things. There's no space to really connect with the kids. We might be in the car with them, like, how was your day? How was your day? But we're not really getting any deeper.
Have a prolonged dinner with a more in-depth conversation.
Yeah. And so again, I think this is why this is a 2-parter. Come back next week. The part 2 really does connect with this, because creating the physical rhythms of rest allow the internal rhythms of rest to be there. And those are the ones you really feel. We think of rest as physical, but it's really, I think you'll feel it more mentally. Yeah. So it might feel like a little overkill to free up evenings. Okay, fine. I'm fine if we do it, fine if we don't.
If you just fill your free evening with Netflix, that's why we're going to have to talk about internal soul rest, mental rest, because there's multiple layers to this. But right now we're just talking about the rhythms of physical rest. Mm-hmm. And then we got a whole other thing we got to talk about how we fill that up. But
so I love that. So related to evenings being free is weekends. So weekends are, I don't know what to think about weekends. And we're still trying to figure this out.
You don't like weekends.
I don't love weekends.
You love weekends. You just don't do well in weekends.
Well, yeah, I have some issues. I don't like responsibilities and have to do chores. And then also I sometimes get antsy on the weekends too. And I have conflicting desires. I want to do absolutely nothing. And I also when I do absolutely nothing, I'm like, what am I doing in my life? Who am I? So I'm figuring myself out.
That would be the next episode.
This is a Graham therapy session, just to hit record it while I'm in therapy. But for us, and this Shay really has driven this, because I don't think in terms of how the whole year is looking. I'm just kind of week to week. And so Shay's hey, I don't want all the weekends to be full. So can we look at the month as a whole? Can we look at August as a whole?
Or the summer as a whole.
Or the summer as a whole. Or if we're getting close to Christmas season, can we think about Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, that block together as a few months? And so when we're making decisions about can we go away for the weekend or have someone over for the weekend or do this busy event for the weekend, that's fine. But what do the other weekends coming up look like? Mm-hmm. So it's almost like if you look at a month or a couple of months together, it's like looking at the nights of a week together and saying, okay, we can have a full weekend or 2 or 3 or 7 if there's at least 2 or 3 or 7 not full weekends and they're mixed up together.
Everything is happening in context. And I see this a lot, actually, where people are making decisions just based on whether that's a good idea or not. We get invited to a cookout. Yeah. Is it a good idea to go to a cookout or not? Yeah, good idea. Opportunity to volunteer at the church. Good idea. Yeah, let's do it. Opportunity for a purchase. Opportunity for this.
Or a vacation.
And we're just looking at it yes, no, is that a good opportunity? Should I do this or shouldn't I do this? Completely ignoring the context of all the other things swirling around that. So my brain just can't do that. I have to look at it in the context of the month. So if we have 2 weekends where we're already committed to things, then I'm not going to commit us the other 2 weekends. And that's not to say that if we get to the other weekends and we feel great and everyone's like rested and we've taken care of everything we need to take care of, that we don't like go have dinner with some friends or have people over. It's not that rigid, but it's just building in margin that we can then decide what we want to do with it instead of overcommitting us. So yes, we look at it a month at a time. I mean, for summer, I literally printed out all 3 months and then cut them in weird ways so that it all ran as like one. It looked like one mega month. And it was just June through or May through August or September, because everything is happening in context and we're not being wise if we're not considering the context of everything else happening around the decision that we're making.
Yeah. And pro tip, if you're married, if you get an opportunity to do something as big as like a traveling thing with work or your business, or as small as, Bob and Sue invited you over for dinner on the weekend, like don't make that decision without talking to your spouse first.
Oh, for sure.
Just because.
That's such a newlywed mistake. Do you remember those arguments?
You're like, but I already told them we're going to come. It's like, well, we can't back out now. Because you want to save face. And it's like, okay, so you care about what they think about you, but not what I think about you. I'm the one that sleeps in the same bed as you.
That's a battle. When you first get married, that's
tough,
real,
man.
where you're just like, anyway, and maybe personality-wise, some people are like, oh, I've been married for 15 years and we still struggle with that.
It's real. But like, there's a lot of wisdom in, okay, presented with an opportunity, data point, we'll talk it over and just make sure, like, because I might think we're free, but Shay might be like, hey, just so you know, like the last 2 weekends have been full, or the 2 weekends after that weekend will be back to back. So that will be 3 weekends where we're like gone the whole time. Do we really want that? And it's not like a shut it down. It's just like, bring the data into context, talk it over and be like, are we good with that? Or are we not good with that?
And because the reality is you may be feeling great and be like, I would love to go hang out with so-and-so this evening. And I might be feeling like I'm exhausted and I need some downtime and I just, whatever. So you got to have those conversations together. Two become one, you're married. You've relinquished your opportunity to make those decisions on your own.
I want to just breeze through this next one just because we kind of touched on it already, and I think it's related to your open day. But Shay and I do date days on Friday because we can, but I've learned a lot of people who don't because that's not modeled. So if you have flexibility in your job, and one of my friends, he has a really big company. I mean, it's a big, small business, but like a lot of employees, warehouse, a lot of things. And he just can't take a full Friday off because I remember talking to him about this. But he needed time to connect with his wife, and they were really disconnected. They felt disconnected. And I remember just one day saying, well, hey, I know you can't take a whole day off like me, or don't feel like you can't do anything. Could you just take Friday lunches? Like you make Friday lunch, just you and your bride. And it was like, oh yeah, I think we could do that. Yeah. And it was a cool idea to like create a moment of like, I'm going to pull away from work. She's going to like have someone watch the kids just for lunch. Yeah. And that was a really cool way to create some space in your week. And part of what I love about our date days on Friday is the week might feel really full.
Oh, for
In the last few weeks, it's felt very full for me. I'm in book launch mode and I'm on a lot of podcasts, and it's like not hard, but like mentally I'm realizing by the end of the week, like, dude, I am like taxed. When I know Friday is open and I can just hang with Shay and we can do this, or we can go out to lunch, we can go for a walk, like, man, I look forward to that. I'm glad there's a break coming on Friday because I can't sustain the space every single day. So we take advantage of Fridays, but not always available.
And again, we realize that's not available for everybody, but there also, to your point, there are a lot of people that could do it, especially if they're entrepreneurs and they don't do it. And there were a lot of years that we didn't do it.
Yeah.
We needed other people to speak into our lives and say like, hey, you got into owning a business for a reason and it's owning you, and you're not really owning your time and enjoying the freedom that you said you were getting into business for. Yeah. So, but what I was actually going to point out is just, I think the reason why we included the examples that we did is because there's different types of rest, physical rest being modeled. There's individual rest. So what do we need as individuals? And then there's rest for us, where we're just together. We're just eye to eye. We're having deep conversation. Like, so that's our Friday date day where we're really connecting heart-wise, mentally. We'll go for a walk, like that kind of thing. And then there's rest for us as a family. And then there's rest. Oh, we didn't talk about the 10 o'clock bedtimes. Like that's an example.
That was our next one.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It's still on here. Spoiler. 10 o'clock bedtimes would be an example of we literally are affording for our kids the opportunity, and for us, we all go to bed at 10.
We have teenagers, so it used to be a lot earlier, which I miss those days.
I miss those days. I was thinking about that
kids
yesterday.
Are in bed. Sweet.
Love to have that back.
Yeah, that's cool.
Now we're all going to bed at the same time, but we're all going to bed at 10. with a few random exceptions if you stay up late to like watch a football game or something like that. But that creates rhythms of physical rest for our children and for us. That particular instance, we're all getting to rest, but we're making sure that our kids are getting 8 hours of sleep. We're getting about 7 hours of sleep. But my point was, before I spoiled our last point, was that there's rest for us together as a family, rhythms of rest
like
as a
that.
family, rhythms of rest as a married couple, rhythms of rest for us individually, rhythms of rest for our children. So them not having a sport every night of the week
Yeah.
or in the evenings means that they can let down.
Yeah.
They can come home and have some space and some stillness.
good.
So just some things to think about. It's going to look different for your family, and that's okay. It's going to look, it'll work for you for 6 months, and then you might have to recalibrate and see if it works for you moving forward. The point is just have the conversation. Are we each getting the rest that we need? If not, how can we work together? How can we change the family schedule a little bit to account for that? Are we giving our kids opportunities for rest? I know they get bored. I know it's easier to keep them busy, but they need opportunities for physical rest too. Are we taking rest together as a family? What could that look like for you in this season? And man, you said this at the top of the episode, but I think rest is one of those things that you just don't even realize the effects until you have it.
Yeah.
And then once you have it and you've experienced it for a little bit, I mean, what people will say is like, I was so much happier. I had so much more clarity. I enjoyed my time with the kids more. I felt so much more optimistic about life. I had so much more joy. We had so much more connection. We weren't fighting. I mean, it's like the benefits, the ripple effects of you being able to be your best self because you have some rest just go on and on and on. But we're so used to surviving in this full throttle, 160 mile an hour way that I think it takes creating the space and then feeling it to be like, oh, I never want to go back to that.
Yeah.
I just don't ever want to do that again. I think we felt a little bit of that post-COVID.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the first time you had to start like showing up at places again and you're like,
Oh, man.
I don't want to go back to the way we used to do things. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's a beautiful opportunity to change things up.
Yeah. The last thought I would just say here to your point is you're not a machine. And we are running, and this is in America. If you're in other cultures that have this a little better figured out, then, you know, this is an interesting observation for you. But in America, we treat humans as machines.
Yeah.
We exist to produce. How much are you producing? And there's different ways of measuring that. How much money do you make? That shows how much you produce in the marketplace. How many accolades do you have? How many trophies
How many people
do
on
your kids?
LinkedIn are you connected to?
Yeah, like these are machine terms of like production. And what's weird about that is that even machines can't run 24/7. They need to be serviced. They need, you know, time off. And if you do run them 24/7, they wear out. But in America, we treat the human as a machine. We treat the family as a machine. We treat our kids as machines. We impose on our kids a lot of times. We want you to produce and like get into a good college and like do all these different things where we're treating them like a machine. And the achievement isn't really the problem. It's just a flawed way to even get there, because actually the way to be the most productive and fruitful and accomplished, if that matters to you, is to rest so that you can then have these exponential moments of productions. But we treat it like this linear machine. And if we were just on longer, we'd get more done, but you will burn out. And what we're saying is if you create some physical space for you, I loved how you broke it down, you, the couple, the kids, the family, to rest, you will actually be more fruitful as people long term because you're actually getting the rest the way you were designed by God.
Well, not to like throw a whole nother point in here, but it was just making me think about children's behavior and how it would be interesting to consider to what extent our kids are acting out because they're freaking tired. Like they're not going to bed early enough. They have TVs in their bedrooms. They have phones in their bedrooms.
Blue light,
The pace of life, we're running to this person's sporting event and this person's sporting event. Like they're just literally not getting enough sleep. And so no one is showing up as their best self, right? That can apply to the parents too. You know, we talked about the no yelling household. Like lack of rhythms of rest, physical rest has an outcome. It has a result. And you may have learned to live with that result, but like, what if you tried things differently and just see if the results change? Because I think it'd be interesting how many children's behavior issues, outbursts are the result of lack of rest. And then marital fights are the result of lack of rhythms of rest.
So good.
Everybody's just tired. Everybody just needs a nap.
It's as simple as that. Isn't that crazy? Well, stick around for part 2 next week. We will dive into the internal rest, the mental rest, the sort of soul rest that's tied to this as well.
Yeah.
And we'll continue the conversation. But before we go, what is something that you are grateful for today?
It was a great day. I got up. I saw on a cold plunge. It's Sunday today when we're recording this, and then we went to church. And you and I got to go out for lunch for a date.
Yeah.
Our kids were in 2 different directions.
I was like, wow, this is awesome.
It was really fun. It was like an unexpected fun day. Grateful for that.
Yes. I was going to say, you stole mine. Super grateful for that. But I would just say I am grateful for, this is not, an easy softball, but for you guys listening and watching, because it's been really cool to see what episodes are like meaningful to you. So the more honest you've been about, hey, this was really helpful in this specific way. I've had some good comments, people sharing like what episode they are listening to and liking the most. It's really, really cool. So it fuels us up, gets us excited to keep doing this. And if this is helpful, let us know. And if there's, again, something you want us to talk about in a future episode, then just message us on YouTube. If you leave a comment, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and you can tell us, hey, I loved it, and this is what I'd love to see in a future episode, and we'll make it happen.
Yeah, sounds good.
Stick around for part 2. We'll see you next week.